Hello and welcome to In the Well. The MK True Crime Channel is taking a summer break this week, but we wanted to share a very special episode featuring yours truly, Mark Geragos and Megyn Kelly. Enjoy, and we'll be back next week. Hope to see you all then. Going back to the bullet, this is one of those things that's been driving me crazy, Megyn, this whole time. The defense filed a brief where they basically suggested to the world that the bullet didn't match, okay? And I've got the quote written down, but they write that that's something the defense can do, whatever. And the prosecution came out and they got in trouble because they not only said it was inconclusive, but they went on TMZ with Mark's buddy, Harvey Levin, who got him in trouble. And he said, we are very confident in the rest of our evidence. And the judge said that violated the bounds of the court order, and he kind of slapped him on the wrist, and he said, "But we're not going to dump the death penalty on that." The best way I think to think about this bullet, this was a large bullet that fragmented upon entry. Okay, and I don't know if this was a frangible round. They haven't made that public yet, but there are certain bullets that are designed to disintegrate. Some are used for hunting. They call them varmint rounds. I've never heard of a 30-06 varmint round, but they must exist, and that's never been made public. The best way to think of it, Megyn, is like if you have a murder scene and you have the killer who picked up like a wine glass, for example, and you know that there's a fingerprint on the wine glass, and then the wine glass shatters into a million pieces, you're going to get an inconclusive result for that too. And a bullet is similar. The way they do the ballistic comparisons, that's kind of how that works. You can't get a fingerprint off shattered glass. What nobody's really been talking about is that there are more than one way. There's more than one way to ballistically match a firearm, and one of them is with expended shell casings. And he cycled the casing. The casing found at the scene matched the rifle. Okay, so it's not just the bullet, and that rifle has his DNA on the trigger. So there's plenty of forensic evidence. And Megyn, you're exactly right. One of these experts is going to say exactly that. I examined it, and that wasn't the bullet, and it couldn't have been fired from that gun. We're going to see something like that either in this phase or in the actual trial.
The defense is going to come right back and they're going to say, of course, his DNA is on that gun. He used that gun before. That was a gun from his house. And of course, there are casings that match it because he wasn't the one who planted the casings. Somebody else threw the casings there. If you've got George Zinn, who's over there confessing and at the front, just coincidentally, you think it's a long stretch to have somebody throw some casings. I mean, none of that. I get the fact that the inconclusive bullet is something that people have run with, but I promise you that the prosecution, and you know this, Matt, that's why he went on to TMZ. He was worried, he is worried that the public has taken that and run with it, and that's a significant doubt. If you get by the way, as you know, if you've got a battle of the experts, what do jurors do with that? I can't tell you how many times they tell me, Al, we discounted the experts and we didn't come to that conclusion. So
yeah, it's exactly right.
I mean, it'd be a lot more helpful for the defense if they didn't have the alleged confessions, the text messages to Lance Twiggs, the Discord messages, and whatever he may or may not have said to police. Be a lot more helpful if they just had a bullet that couldn't be conclusively matched, but they have more than that. I will show you this soundbite from Rob O'Neill, who I adore, and he is, of course, a former Navy SEAL sniper who not only shot Osama bin Laden in the face, but has been on some of our most daring and dangerous missions as part of SEAL Team 6 for the past 20 plus years prior to his retirement. And here's what he said. This is not, he has no dog in this hunt. And this is what he said about this wound on Charlie and this gun.
Just for me, I mean, it was off at right from the beginning for me. Do we not guard rooftops anymore? There's been assassination attempts all over the world. Right. Why aren't we looking at rooftops? And then when I was sent the video with this at the same message where they said Charlie Kirk was just shot. When I watched that horrific video, he was obviously dead before he hit the ground. But the questions immediately started to come to me. That was not an entry wound that we saw. We saw an exit wound. So where'd that bullet come from? You don't bleed like, and I've shot guys closer than the camera was. And an entry wound doesn't look like that. An exit wound does.
I could play you 20 videos like that from gun experts.
Yeah, I
talking
love that guy
about
too,
this
Megan. I
gun.
can tell you right now he's wrong. I watched that video. That's an arterial bleed from an entry wound. They recovered the entire bullet on the inside. It's heavily fragmented and damaged. So love him. I think he's an American hero. He's dead wrong on that one, and he's never tried or presented this type of evidence in front of a jury or slogged through expert testimony.
I'm glad to hear you disagree. That's what we're here for. But what about, Matt? You've heard, many people believe that a 30-06 and that gun and that level bullet would never have not had an exit wound. That the fact that there was this alleged surgeon who said, "Oh, Charlie's got like a Superman-like spine. He was so strong that his bones stopped it. That's why there wasn't an exit wound." And many people just said immediately, "That's utter bullshit. That we don't believe that."
Mark Geragos, my friend, has seen probably more autopsies than I have after 17 years in homicide. Bullets do weird things, and this thing fragmented. They recovered the whole thing. And when you hit bones, bullets break apart. And I don't care if it's a 30-06. And that's the thing. They never released what kind of ammunition it was, but this was an antique rifle. If this was antique ammo to boot, who knows? But there is no mystery here other than speculation and kind of nonsense. I mean, you see this all the time in homicide cases, Megan, where sometimes the bullets go right through and it looks like they're pristine. Sometimes they will hit a bone and shatter it and stay inside. Sometimes little rounds spin around, bank all over the place inside a human body. Part of our used to go watch the autopsies on our homicides, and it is you'd be amazed the things that different bullets will do. And there we go. That's a Mauser. I believe it's a Mauser 98. That is a rifle that was designed well over 100 years ago. It's still that, and that's a really old one, but they still make those because it's a simple design and it works. But ammunition, depending on the ammunition, they design certain rounds to break apart, to shoot coyotes. It's literally called varmint ammunition. And there's no, it's not like they got in there and couldn't account for the weight or the grains. Apparently, it's all inside his body. It hit his spine. Viva's right; he was dead instantly, or very close to it. Thank God. But yeah, this is the kind of stuff that the conspiracy theories, and these are a bunch of people who haven't witnessed autopsies, haven't seen bullets pulled out of human bodies before, and the only person who might have seen more of them than me is probably my friend Mark Geragos right there at the bottom. And
do you agree with him, Mark?
Yeah, the Matt, as usual, is spot on. The issue of what a bullet will do. In fact, I have cross-examined, I can't tell you how many ballistics experts, and when they talk about, they shoot bullets into water. They shoot bullets. You should see how they testify as to how they test guns and how they test casings and things of that nature. And I have used exactly what Matt has said as fodder for cross-examination, saying, by the way, lay the foundation. Have you ever been to an autopsy? Have you seen what bullets do? For you to say that you can try to recreate it by shooting it into a long trough of water or something else is just complete and utter nonsense, because it's almost as if I've actually had ballistics experts admit to me that bullets have a mind of their own. I mean, I've actually had that statement repeated back to me on cross-examination. That doesn't mean, however, that the defense is going to not run with that. The defense has an obligation to run with that. The defense has an absolute duty, zealous advocacy to kind of plumb the depths of that, because God only knows what is going on here. I mean, this has not been, I think Matt would probably admit if this were, he wouldn't admit that he's ever had this situation down in Orange County, but he probably, if I was out with him at CrimeCon in Vegas, would admit that he has chastised investigators for doing stuff like this before, because this is not, you're not.
What do you mean? Doing stuff like what?
This is not a primer on a really good investigation, number one. And I don't want to be the armchair quarterback second guessing, but this once again has all the earmarks of some people in over their head, at least initially. There's a lot of things that were done here that I think are going to come out during this preliminary hearing, and the defense is going to bring out as to what investigators did or didn't do.
Megyn,
I want to hear more on that, but Viva, I want you to weigh in.
Well, when I hear people say this, a 30-06 would always leave an exit wound. It's impossible, inconceivable that it wouldn't. And then I say Martin Luther King Jr. And then people are like, well, I don't believe that report either, because you're believing Fed slop if you believe that bullet actually killed Martin Luther King. So you're having an argument with people who basically push unfalsifiable theories where, if you say it always leaves an exit wound, there's probably a few soldiers from World War II that can testify that a 30-06 doesn't always leave an exit wound. Then you say Martin Luther King got shot in the face. And if they believe it, they say, oh, well, that hit his jawbone. Okay, so a jawbone can stop it, but not a spine or spine, well, not the spinal cord, but not the spine bones. And then you say, well, I don't believe that Martin Luther King got shot in the face with the 30-06 either. So therefore, I stand by it could never have been a 30-06. Anybody saying that, and I'm not a gun expert, I'm not an ammunitions expert by any means. I was a lawyer for 13 years. My question has always been, do you know the condition of the ammo? If you don't know the condition of the ammo, you are not in a position to definitively say how the ideal ammo would perform and what it would do to a human body.
So this is big. They finally arrested this guy. We've been waiting for it since her body was in the trunk of his car. But Matt, up until now, they hadn't been able to link him to the crime, at least not in a way that they felt was sufficient for charges to be brought. Do we know what changed?
Well, what they did is they conducted an investigative grand jury, Megyn, which is really interesting. Mark and I were talking a little bit about this yesterday. Essentially, there's two functions for a grand jury. One, you can seek an indictment. The other is you can actually use grand jury subpoenas to bring in reluctant witnesses that don't want to speak to the police and essentially force immunity on them and make them talk. And Mark knows the DA involved in this. I don't know her, but apparently she's a heavy hitter, according to Mark. And they've been working this case up for a long time. This is advanced prosecutorial work, and and they apparently have put together this case. The complaint itself tells quite a story, with lying in wait and the stabbing and killing a witness. And it makes it appear as if they got the goods here to show that he killed her because he was engaged in a sexual relationship with her. They knew each other or began seeing each other when she was only 13 years old, which is 288 under the California Penal Code. And it all kind of fits. I know Mark has some different theories on it. Mark probably has a better inside track on the case than I do, but this is very, very interesting. And he's in kind of an understatement. He's in a lot of trouble.
He's 21 currently. So by any measure, having sexual relations with a 13-year-old would be illegal. So yeah, that's the alleged motive. But what we last heard, Mark, was it was April 23rd, 2025 that he invited her to his home in the Hollywood Hills. Celeste was her name, Celeste Rivas. And she arrived there. She was never seen again. But then on September of 2025, that's when her remains were found in the trunk of a car that was registered to him. And so we kind of knew that they were having an affair. There wasn't like proof positive of it, but it seemed very clear from their little videos together. They were definitely friends. They were with each other a lot. But, getting from that to he's the one who put her in the trunk of that car that's where cases are made or fall apart.
Well, Matt's right as usual about a lot of things. And in this case, he's right about the fact that the DA involved, Beth Silverman, to say she's tenacious is an understatement.
think, though, that there is a lot more going on here. And let me kind of set the stage for it, because I don't know that I've ever seen this all happen before. Not only did they have a medical examiner, we know today or yesterday, when the published reports were that the exam was released, and there was information as of December of last year that the medical examiner had come to the conclusion that the cause of death was use of a sharp instrument, that there were fingers that were severed, and they had a toxicology that at least showed the presence of drugs. You combine that with the fact that what's being reported today also, if true, is that there was child porn, meaning images of females who were under 18 on David's phone. All of that would have been known to the DA last year, which leads you to why did the LAPD go in months ago, get rebuffed first, and then successfully later muzzle the medical examiner, to the point where the medical examiner, something I've never seen before, came out publicly and pushed back against that, put on his website a statement saying, that this is not transparent, that this shouldn't happen. Not once, but twice did he do that. And then yesterday, after the DA asked that the medical report be released, he thanked his partner agencies. I'm going to wildly speculate here that what happened was they arrested him on Thursday, so that I think the LAPD did that so that they could force the DA to file this case. They did not have a criminal complaint. They did not have an indictment when they arrested him. There's this weird violation, I think constitutional violation, where you can arrest somebody on a Thursday and not put them before a magistrate until a Monday, which is beyond what the Supreme Court says for 48 hours. That forced the DA to come in heavy and file this case on Monday. The defense did something I think very astute. They said, that's fine. You can dump terabytes of information on us. We're ready for trial, which was in contrast to what happened in the Reiner case, where they dumped terabytes of information and the public defender said, hey, I need 2 or 3 months. I don't have enough time. I think that the ball's back in the DA's court, and the DA may go get an indictment at this point.
Matt, what do you make of that? That she was dragged to it kicking and screaming by cops who were like, it's time.
I had a conversation with Harvey Levin on TMZ about this. And of course, that's Mark's partner on another podcast, which is
By
sort
the
of
way,
funny.
he called me.
Where Mark is always right. You're always right, and Harvey's always wrong.
And by the way, Harvey even called me a slut, to his words, for doing Megyn Kelly True Crime with Matt. I was
told
called
him,
a
yeah.
slut.
I told him that Mark was cheating on him with
Sheriff
me. in our new
Harvey is
podcast.
one to talk. I have another ransom note.
Yeah.
How many 50,000 podcasts can I tease it on?
Yeah,
Please.
So I
Okay.
was slut shamed, so I'll leave it at that. So.
Yeah. Well, you are.
I'm honored that you're slutting it
and
up
I will
with
be.
me.
I will be doing
Here it
all I
goes.
can to lure you away from that man, just so we can set the record straight.
Yes, Matt.
So we Harvey and I went back and forth a little bit on that, and he was actually very pleasant, Megyn. I'd never been on the show before, but I took sort
That
of
was the day?
I took a counter position, and he agrees with Mark on this. I think I've had some dealings with Nathan Hochman, and it's all of mine have been very positive. It is unusual. I've never seen it done quite that way, but I think you can. And they've been working on this thing for months and months. And I think that one move certainly is refusing to waive time. But on the other hand, there's a thing in California called Prop 115, where you can just you can put on hearsay statement to establish probable cause. All the DA needs to do here is basically call the lead and maybe 1 or 2 other witnesses regarding what happened in front of the grand jury, and they get the ball over the net on that. And then they're just in the discovery phase. That's what I would do if I was them. You kind of.
But you know what? You want to know what I would do back, Matt? And you and I discussed this. there's this little known provision in the penal code called 866. California Supreme Court said, if you're going to go and try and just put on a bare bones prelim, the only way we're going to say that that gives you due process is if the defense can make an offer to the court and say, we're going to call witnesses because we don't think you're telling the whole truth. And that's what I would do. If they try to bare bones what we call 115 prelim, which, by the way, Murphy pioneered down in Orange County. I can't tell you how many times he hoisted me on a 115 petard of a prelim. But 866 is if you can convince the judge, then your witness, you can put the witness on. I don't think the DA is ready to put these witnesses on and subject them to the cross-examination. We'll see soon enough.
Yeah,
I mean, and maybe it's just me, but it doesn't seem like that confusing or complicated a case. If she's got child sexual abuse materials on his phone, Matt, he's not getting out. He's going to have additional charges filed against him. And I don't know if they can prove murder, but it's very, very bad that he was having sex with a 13-year-old girl who is now dead and dismembered in the back of his car. That alone would be pretty circumstantial. But I'll bet you there's more.
So, yeah, well, I read the coroner's reports yesterday, and one of the interesting things about this is that she was essentially, the decomp was very advanced, and so she was basically a skeleton inside the car, but they left her tube top on, and there were cuts in the tube top indicating, and I'll bet you anything that there's going to be, when we get the full report, there's going to be nicks on the ribs underneath that. So I think they're going to be able to prove a murder. I don't know if they're going to be able to prove that he was the killer or not, but he certainly, under the theory that they're advancing, was the one that stood to gain. But and Mark has had this experience, and I have too. Juries, if you get in child pornography, that case, you're basically on third base, and all you need is a base hit prosecution-wise, because the jury will hate him so much for just possession of the child pornography. And it fits. Look, that's corroborative to this idea that they were having a sexual relationship. And also, if that's true, and of course we haven't seen it yet, I think that the vast majority of public sympathy for this guy is going to evaporate overnight if that's true. Hopefully we'll never see those images.
If anybody has it.
Yeah. Listening to those people in the previous segment, as I'm sitting in the green room waiting to come on, and the septum rings and all that, the railing against federal law enforcement, these are some of the people that are most dedicated to getting sex offenders arrested, putting them in prison, and then ultimately deporting them if they're not here legally, right? And in 2023, ICE arrested 4,390 sex offenders. It's a part of their job. That was the last year of Joe Biden. And nobody said a friggin' word, because back then, shockingly, we all kind of agreed it's a bit of a bipartisan issue. We're going to protect kids who aren't political at all. Children deserve the protection of all adults, regardless of what side of the political aisle they're on, right? So in 2024, last year, first year of President Trump, ICE arrested 16,552 sex offenders. And that is their priority. They had a special operation in the state of Florida called Operation Dirtbag. And that's the federal law enforcement officials, the women and men that do that, are critical to protecting our kids. And these people that think it's a good idea to block their cars, they have no idea who they're going after. They prioritize sex offenders and violent felons and gang members. But particularly given how many there are, these federal agents in ICE and other federal agencies prioritize sex offenders. And there should be no rational debate about that. So somebody that goes and drives their car.
I wonder, Matt, if they said, I wonder if Tom Homan came out and Kristi Noem and said, we're making an announcement. We are now, for the next 6 months, only targeting child sex offenders, only child sex molesters. What would they do? I mean, it would be a very interesting experiment to see whether the same, Karen Antifas would stay out there.
You know what? I think they probably would, because these people are so crazy. I don't know if it's the septum rings that's making them mad, because every time you look, it's like they got a ring hanging out of their nose.
It is related to being extremely homely. It is.
Maybe so. I don't know. But as a prosecutor, it is maddening to me because I know the work that ICE agents are doing as a sexual assault prosecutor. And same thing with the FBI. They devote a tremendous amount of resource to that. And the idea that somebody is blocking them, again, they think they're doing good. I think their motivations, I want to believe that they think they're doing the right thing, but they're so friggin' stupid because they don't understand what ICE is actually attempting to accomplish. And at the end, the people who benefit are their own children. It is maddening to me.
Yes, exactly.
And
I don't understand how a mother could get out there and try to stop these arrests of these molesters. All right, I want to keep going because I don't have that much time. I've got to ask you about Renee Good's wife. We played the video earlier of her antagonizing that cop, and now we know from his own camera on his iPhone that she was the one who said, "Drive, baby, drive." She told the wife to do it. And we also know that the two of them had been working together to train, to antagonize ICE. She was part of the perpendicular parking that Renee Good did earlier, we believe. So could there be charges against Renee Good's wife?
Yes, there could be charges against her wife, and not even for the aiding and abetting or the encouraging of driving forward. But she keeps being referred to as a protester, and from a purely legal breakdown. Okay, she comes from Colorado. I've read that she's a paid protester. I haven't seen the evidence on that or not. But when you get together with a group of people, including just one other person in your car, and you decide you're going to go out and you're going to impede federal agents attempting to arrest violent felons or sex offenders, that's a conspiracy. It's two or more people agreeing to go and commit a crime. And if it's federal agents and you cross state lines, it is a federal felony. It's a conspiracy to do that. So before we even get to what she was yelling in the car, that by itself is really problematic. Protesting, in my mind, is you're standing on a corner with a bullhorn, waving flags or signs that you've written with your Sharpie.
Wait a minute, though, Matt. I don't know if she crossed state lines. They lived in Colorado, then they moved to Canada after Trump was elected, according to the reports, and then moved to Minneapolis. I guess Canada wasn't all it's cracked up to be. Yeah. But does that change things? Wouldn't the feds have jurisdiction anyway because it was a federal officer?
They would absolutely have jurisdiction anyway. There's multiple theories to get there, and I don't know. And again, I've only seen what the rest of us have, what's been released online. I haven't been able to read any, I don't think any real documents have been released yet. But here's another thing just to keep in mind. A lot of the analysis on this, I defend police officers now, Megyn. That's the bulk of my practice, as you know. And a lot of the discussion out there is what was this woman thinking when she was driving forward? What was she thinking? Certainly she wasn't trying to kill him. Legally, there's a case called Graham v. O'Connor. It's a 1989 U.S. Supreme Court case that talks about how we analyze use of force by police officers. And it is a seminal case in American jurisprudence. And essentially, it stands for the proposition that it must be viewed from the position of the police officer when he or she perceived the threat. Okay, did they reasonably perceive?
Is it subjective?
It's a mix.
Subjective
it's a really
or
good
objective?
question. Only a lawyer would ask that. It is a mix of objective and subjective circumstances. Yes. Okay. And it is.
I remember that from criminal procedure.
That's right. It is.
Just explain to the audience what that means.
So it's known as the 20/20 hindsight rule. Colloquially, that's what this case is known. And that is, we don't pick apart the actions or thoughts of that particular police officer. You have to look at it objectively. What would a reasonable police officer in the shoes of that officer feel as far as perception of a threat? And she drove her car forward. I saw that, like she actually hit him with her car. So it all boils down to any shooting of a mother is tragic, right? That is sad. But the legal analysis of that is, what would a reasonable police officer in the position of that federal agent feel as this woman, and that federal agent had personally been dragged by another car within the last year and severely injured, right?
Which would be relevant.
So it is, and it's a mix of that officer's individual experience, their fear of what's going on, along with the objective circumstances that the officer is faced with. And there was a great clip, I don't know if you saw this, the chief of Chicago PD, of all places, and I was kind of surprised, he went on a rant talking about how if you're blocking federal agents intentionally, that's how people get ambushed. Like any of your
Yeah.
viewers who are ever in
He
the
was
military.
great. We found out it was from October, but the point was totally well taken.
Right.
But there's another Supreme Court case that says it doesn't matter if the first bullet was justified, because cops are trained to shoot to kill. If they're firing their gun, they're trying to kill. There's no shooting in the leg nonsense like we see in the movies. But there's another Supreme Court precedent that says you don't start evaluating the second and the third bullet when they all come together like that. That's not, because there are a lot of people saying, oh, but the second shot and the third shot, Matt, are the reason to charge this guy.
Yeah, and number one, that's exactly what the Supreme Court prohibits. Okay, that is hindsight 2020. That's dissecting something in a rapidly evolving situation that person has to make split-second decisions for their own safety and the safety of other officers and the safety of other quote-unquote protesters too. So it's a split-second thing. And the next thought here, Megyn, is what's the end game? You know, there's a thing known as officer-created jeopardy, which is something I've been dealing with on a case I have, a homicide case in Los Angeles County right now, where an innocent police officer has been charged with a homicide for shooting a gang member in 2018 because the guy with high on meth, sitting in a stolen car, murder suspect in a separate case, all of a sudden reaches for what anybody would think was a sawed-off shotgun. Later, it turns out to be a BB gun. And BLM gets involved, and they took a principled stand. Jackie Lacey, who's a friend of mine, former DA of LA, took a principled stand, refused to file because he was innocent. George Gascon comes in, files that case. Now you got a guy who is a model police officer, #1 in his academy class, father of 2 kids, Little League coach, one of the best cops I've ever worked with in 33 years, and he gets charged with a homicide. Imagine this, for those circumstances. And I'm going to win it one way or another. We have a new DA, Nathan Hochman, who is solid. Okay, but I'm hoping they're going to dismiss it. But what is the end game here? You've got the governor, you've got the mayor, all calling for this agent to be prosecuted with murder. And first of all, there's a whole procedure that they're going to have to survive in order to do that, where it's called a federal removal order. A federal judge gets to make the call of whether or not he was acting reasonably, essentially in conformity with his duties, which I think that's going to be tough for any prosecution to get around. But these people that keep talking, friggin' Tim Walz and all these people, we don't do mob justice in America, or we're not supposed to anyway. And the mayor who keeps blabbing, like, I think that they, at the very least, if they're ever successful in getting a murder prosecution against him, there's no way that's going to be in Minneapolis, and it's going to be in some other county, like we saw in Coburger, where they have to remove it from the local area. But what's the next step? So do we just start prosecuting our cops? Is that the idea? So so if we have a Democratic president who's trying to get sex offenders or Somalian fraudsters out of the country, then it's okay. But if it's a Republican that we don't like, then all of a sudden the same agents. And by the way,
thank God the feds have taken control of the investigation. Taking a look at the 2 men featured in this Leaving Neverland, quote unquote, documentary. Wade Robson they both met Michael when they were children. Wade was this Michael Jackson lookalike from Australia who got folded into Michael's orbit. I think he won a contest and met him, and might have appeared in like a music video with him, and went on to become a well-known choreographer, stayed close with the Michael Jackson estate, with Michael himself, said very, very nice things about Michael his whole life, actually testified under oath that Michael never laid a hand on him, both in the 1993 accusations. That one didn't go to trial, but did testify or told the sheriff nothing, absolutely nothing with me. And then in 2003, in your case, Mark, was again a witness for Jackson under oath, nothing. Then comes this documentary, again in quotes, Leaving Neverland, and he has a very different story. Here is part of it. This is, viewer warning, disturbing. And I must say, for the record, we took out the most disturbing parts just because it's very dark, but you can imagine it. SOT 7.
And then him guiding me to do the same thing with him. So moving my hands to touch his penis, which, was erect. And I remember him putting my hands on his head when he was down there. I'll never forget the the feeling of his hair. That was rough, almost like a Brillo pad, like this roughness. And he's down there, and with his mouth on my 7-year-old penis.
Okay, Mark. So I have to say, when I watched the movie, I was horrified, and I found him very credible. And then I started to research him, and let's just say less so. So he sued the Jackson estate reportedly after he found out that he was not going to get this job with Cirque du Soleil and their production of Michael Jackson. Cirque du Soleil had licensed some Michael Jackson songs, and they were sort of rehabilitating the MJ name. And he thought he was going to get a role with them and didn't, and reportedly had some sour grapes over it. And then lo and behold said, I was a victim too, and filed a lawsuit against the estate. And in the deposition testimony he had to give in the context of the civil case was asked, did you ever write anything about these allegations that you're making now? And he claimed under oath, he testified, no, never. But it turned out he had written a whole book alleging that he'd been molested. The defense team demanded the copies of it. My information was he did have to produce what he had, and that took a motion and a judge ordering it, and he tried to wiggle out of doing it. And then they actually got some of the metadata from the drafts from the publishing companies. They went, the defense team, to publishing companies saying, did you get pitched a book about Michael Jackson by Wade Robson? And they did. And they got their hands on other versions of the book, and his story differed version to version. And then there was testimony of him earlier that made clear he didn't remember the details. But by the time he got around to this documentary, again in quotes, his memory was crystal clear for all of the abuse allegations, all of which left me with a lot of questions. With all due respect to this man, because I don't know whether this happened, and I don't want to attack somebody who may have been molested, but I just have to be honest, did not find the story credible at all when it was said and done. Your thoughts?
Well, the experience I've had with Leaving Neverland is famously they have a clip of me coming out and saying, I'm going to land on you like a ton of bricks or something along those lines. The implication being is that I was coming out and attacking the
Oh, we have this, Mark.
Yeah,
Hold on, I'll show the soundbite. This is from the documentary Leaving Neverland. It's you, Sat9.
A news clip of Mark Geragos, who initially represented Michael in 2003 in the criminal case, is manipulated to appear as if he's threatening an accuser after Michael's arrest.
We will land on you like a ton of bricks. We will land on you like a hammer. If you do anything to besmirch this man's reputation, anything to intrude on his privacy in any way that's actionable, we will unleash a legal torrent like you've never seen.
In fact, he was talking about a completely different legal case in which he and Michael were secretly videotaped on board a charter aircraft.
Disclosed that those two video cameras, which also apparently had audio on them, were surreptitiously placed in there, were recording attorney-client conversations.
So just to make clear, Mark, there was a rebuttal to Leaving Neverland called Lies of Leaving Neverland. It's on YouTube now. And that was one of the lies they were pointing out that they perceived in the documentary as regards you. Keep going.
Correct. And that was it was so offensive to me when Leaving Neverland came out, because what I had described there in the press conference in real time, and what I was so angry about, was they had filmed my conversations with him, attorney-client, which are sacrosanct, and they were marketing it. In fact, Greta Van Susteren was the one who called me the next day saying, this guy, this lawyer has got the tape and he's shopping it for $1 million. And I called the lawyer and said, have you lost your mind? And he said, well, this is my client's lottery ticket. I went into court immediately, got a court order. Before I could execute the court order to go get it, the FBI was there. They seized it from the lawyer, and this guy was indicted who had done the the surreptitious taping. So it was a wild situation to then take that and manipulate it. One of the reasons sometimes these documentaries drive me crazy, because it's great to tell a story, and documentaries can be some of the most effective storytelling there is, but you shouldn't really manipulate the facts to the point that you just literally tell a story that is not true. And that's why I was so...
No, then it's a docudrama and not a documentary. And that's, yeah, so they did that. If they played fast and loose like that with you, what did they do with these other two men who are featured in it? And I just think, I don't know whether those facts are fatal to Wade Robson's claim, which has been resurrected because California passed one of those laws like New York did, where claims that were out of time and were sort of dead claims could be resurrected for a brief period of time if they related to sexual abuse. And Wade and James Safechuck took advantage of that and got their claims against the MJ estate resurrected. They go on to this day as a result. But I do know that as a journalist or a storyteller doing a documentary, you must include the credibility problems in your documentary and let the audience decide. And this guy did not do that on either one of these men, which is it is a fatal flaw in the presentation.
By the way, if you're in a jury trial and this happened, say that this kind of manipulation happened, you would get a jury instruction that says a witness who is willfully false in a material part of his testimony, he or she can be and should be disbelieved in others. I was thinking this morning, it's funny, Megyn, that before I did this, I was watching the closing argument in Harvey Weinstein's third trial here in New York in the Manhattan court. Mark Agnifilo was giving it. I ran into, speaking of podcasts, Arthur Aidala, who tried it the second time, and he sends his regards. And I was thinking as I sat there about the accuser in this third trial, and such damaged goods, no matter what you say, given the testimony, given the medical records, the accuser clearly has mental health issues that are off the charts. So the argument becomes, when you're analyzing it, did the abuse cause this, or are the mental health chicken or egg? Is it the mental health that is causing the person to make the accusation? And those kinds of determinations should be left up to jurors in the courtroom and viewers in documentary. To your point, why ignore things that could be credibility issues? Let people decide based on a fulsome record as opposed to a skewed argument or kind of a rhetorical device.
Yes, absolutely. There was, in that Lies of Leaving Neverland, they pointed out this thing I just mentioned about how Wade's deposition reveals that he had to ask his mom to remember details about the alleged abuse. And that was at an earlier point in time than when he's with Leaving Neverland, remembering them all. He's got great details. He's a good storyteller. He can really take you there. If you watch the documentary, again in quotes, boy, he really adds a lot of color, none of which he remembered years earlier when he was under oath and asked to tell this story. So there are a lot of questions. James Safechuck, he made equally disturbing allegations in the piece, Leaving Neverland. The knock against him is that he was reportedly facing a serious lawsuit that hit right before he sat down for that documentary, and was facing some serious financial threats. And that would have incentivized his filing a civil suit, as he did, and participating with this, quote, documentary. And again, that may not move you at all, but it should be disclosed by a filmmaker. In any event, here's James Safechuck, in part, again, with a viewer warning on the disturbing nature of what he's going to say in Sod 8.
At the train station, there's a room upstairs. And we would have sex up there too. Would happen every day. It sounds sick, but it's kind of like when you're first dating somebody, right? You do a lot of it. So it was very much like that. He liked if I rubbed his nipples. So we would do stuff, and then in the end, when he wanted to ejaculate, he would finish himself. We'd be in the hotel room, and he would pretend like somebody was coming in, and you had to get dressed as fast as possible without making noise. So not getting caught was a big, just kind of fundamental. It was very much a secret. And he would tell me that if anybody found out, his life would be over and my life would be over.
So he did say there that he remembers the abuse in Michael Jackson's train station. He had
I was just going to say,
playful.
you mentioned Matt Murphy, and my podcast partner, Matt, in fact, Matt and I faced off on a number of sex crime prosecutions. And Matt, I'm going to channel him and say that he would say that some of those things have the kind of insignia or indicia of what he has seen repeatedly and what I've seen coming at clients who are accused as well. So it's a very tough situation. I don't think there are any easy answers. And the look back statutes, which you referenced, which are these statutes that revive statutes of limitations that have already expired. They actually started when in the criminal context, and there was a case, Stogner, where they said you can't prosecute somebody criminally when you're going to take away their liberty after the statute has expired, but they left open the issue on these civil cases. And some of these civil cases and these look-back statutes present real problems from my standpoint when you're trying to relitigate these later on, years later, when somebody didn't have notice or anything
like the defendant is dead.
Yeah. And now you've got the estate, and you've got, and you don't see it happening against somebody who's to quote my other podcast and close friend Adam Carolla, you never see people coming after the empty bags. So there is that as well.
Yeah.
So it really is a conundrum.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Christine Blasey Ford situation against Brett Kavanaugh, where it's like, how is the guy supposed to defend himself 30 years later on, what he did or did not do on a particular day? Now, in that case, where you're dealing with a would-be Supreme Court justice, so it just so happened he did have detailed day planners even from his time as a teenager. So, Geragos, I haven't heard your take on the Nancy Guthrie case. What is it?
Not that different from my friend and partner, Matt Murphy. This sheriff, I think, all roads lead to this sheriff. And I think that, it's not a surprise that I have some criticism of law enforcement. But in this particular case, this may be kind of a blueprint for how you don't investigate a case, how you don't handle the messaging around a case. And it's a tragedy anyway. Everybody their heart goes out to it, but this sheriff has just been atrocious, in my opinion.
Do you have any theory, Geragos, just given your lifetime in, criminal defense work, on whether this was a likely kidnapping, a likely murder, and then removal of the body?
I always thought that the focus on the family first, which I understand and I get, but I thought that being a bi-coastal elite and living between LA and New York, I missed what people were saying initially who were on the ground there, that look, you're very close to the border. These things happen. I think there was another, I won't call it similar case, but something that had kind of the earmarks of an abduction, and that it probably was a stranger abduction for money at a certain point, and it spiraled out of control because of the supersizing of the case itself.
Interesting. Okay, so Matt Murphy, you have been covering this from the beginning, and yesterday here on our show, we dropped a bit of a bombshell ourselves where we found video of Nancy Guthrie's bedroom, which aired on the Today Show in 2013. I mean, we were stunned to see it ourselves. We're putting together this Nancy Guthrie bit, and we were doing some deep research, and there it was in 2013. There's Nancy. Look at this, standing in her bedroom. This is in the house from which she was taken. Back in 2013, though, and it shows her bed, it shows the nightside table, it shows the window right next to the bed, very tight quarters there. And in this long back and forth she did with the Today Show anchors on the set of the Today. And to me, I wondered whether law enforcement even knew this existed, because you and I, after having looked at this, could credibly convince law enforcement that we knew what Nancy's bedroom looked like, how it was set up. And if we wanted to write, let's say, a demand for ransom in Bitcoin and send it in and sound credible, we might take a detail from the outside of the house that was readily identifiable to anybody, like the floodlight that was dangling, and couple it with a few details from the inside of Nancy's bedroom, which we had seen thanks to a little bit of research prior to sending our notes, and convince somebody that we were the kidnappers.
Well, that's right. I mean, there's, as they say, the internet lives forever, right? And, I think that, number one, I totally agree with Mark that all roads lead back to this sheriff. And look, I want to be fair, Megyn, but this has been a clown show from day one. You've got really good law enforcement on the ground, especially in the FBI. But I've dealt with Pima County on a big murder case out of Orange County, and they were top notch. They were absolutely professional. I don't know what has happened to Pima County since.
Well, reportedly a bunch of cops fled and did not like working for him, and that he's lost a lot of his more experienced.
Well, who could have ever guessed that based on the performance that we've seen? I mean, it's just. I think Mark put it perfectly. It's so sad, but yeah, so many of these. I think all of them, but. If not every single one of them, most, all of these ransom notes were all fake. All the stuff to Mark's friend Harvey Levin, I think those were all fake. And
the Nancy Guthrie home video adds to that possibility. That's my point. Is like, did they know? Did the sheriff know that? Because they were like, oh, they had a detail like where her watch was. I mean, I could easily say her watch was on the small bedside table right next to her bed with the old style sort of lantern looking lamp feet away from a window that was over a bookshelf that had electronics on it. I mean, I guarantee you Chef Nanos did not know about that video and could easily have bought the whole thing as credible evidence that this guy had been in her room.
Well, Chris Nanos demonstrated to the entire nation that he didn't know what a DNA mixture was in one of his interviews, which when he said the lab is having problems with the mixture in Florida, which is there's some lab director who's pulling his hair out or her hair out when they heard that, which is just, it's absurd. So this guy's, I don't know how old he is. I don't know what the deal is, but that it just, there are hardworking, women and men in law enforcement on the ground level on this that probably haven't slept a full 8 hours since this thing started, and they're being misserved. I think the family's being misserved. And, you call in the media, you got to expect, the loonies are going to come out and say the vampires abducted her. You got a lot of well-meaning people that are going to come in with tips trying to help that almost never go anywhere. And Mark and I have dealt with a million of those where it's like, I heard noises down the street and it turns out it's the raccoons in the trash can again. Or I heard a lady screaming, but it could be my neighbor's wife. You deal with all those. You got to devote resources to those. And now in the modern era, we have scammers who attempt to take advantage and profit from the apoplectic grief of families that are going through the worst thing that a family can go through. And at the helm of this, sinking ship is this guy that keeps taking to the microphones. Although I think he stopped doing that a little bit. He's doing one-on-one interviews. And now he's coming back blasting the media on stuff. He brought the media in at the very beginning of this, and I've got no criticism of that. But it's like, dude, you gotta be prepared to answer some questions, know your evidence, and take a little bit of heat and criticism. That goes with the job.
I mean, honestly, every missing person their family in this nation would give anything to have the kind of media coverage of the case that Nancy Guthrie has received. The media is a blessing, not a curse. There's some downside, I don't deny that, but it's way more upside in having this much media attention on the case because they require 400 officers. That's how we got 400 officers on Nancy Guthrie. It wasn't just because Savannah was the daughter. It's because the media was constantly out there, constantly peppering them with demands for more information. So please spare me on the media blame. And I don't love the media, even just because I'm a part of it. I wouldn't say this if I didn't actually believe it.